Hi everybody. Since I have to be in Lisbon this week, this will just be a quick little Q&A. While editing, I decided to kind of split it up into two, so the other one will be sometime in the future. This will just be more about where the house is specifically and about the process of finding it, plus a quick little about me. And since I can't do this whole thing walking, I borrowed a cat to help keep me calm, so hopefully her purring isn't too loud. So starting off with how I found the house in the first place. I used a website called Idealista. It's pretty much the main resource everybody uses here. It just kind of sort of aggregates all the different real estate companies into one area, and you can search by price and location and even draw out specific areas. So it's a really good resource to use. And also includes rentals and land and commercials and all those different options. One tip I did realize from looking online is if there's no pictures of the inside of the house, then pretty much assume that there's no inside or it'll have to be completely gutted. So when looking for the house itself, I had a few specific qualifications that I was looking for. I wanted it to be preferably under 25,000. There's definitely some wiggle room, and I think I set my searches for like 35 or 40,000 because you can always negotiate. I wanted it to be in good enough condition that I could live in it while working on it. I wanted it to be at least close to a city or town or something that had facilities and not just out in the middle of the country, because I also didn't want to have a car. I wanted it to be close to some sort of public transportation, either bus or train. Ideally train because it's just more convenient and I really like trains. So I was looking for places around within like 2 kilometers of a train station, which is actually kind of hard to find because there's no actual map of the trains in Portugal. So I was just kind of having to look on Google to find trace the routes and follow where the stations were. Like I said, I didn't want to need to have a car. If I want to get a car in the future, then I might. My car in Alaska, I really love it, but it's almost as old as me, and just having to deal with an old car and maintenance issues and everything is just something I didn't want to carry over into Portugal, because I wouldn't be able to afford a new car here anyway. And needing a car would just add a whole extra layer of complications to start out with, because I'd have to learn all the road signs and driving conditions and the old medieval streets and having to find a mechanic, and it just wasn't something I wanted to deal with at the beginning on top of everything else. And if I need a car, I can just rent one. I also wanted a yard or some land. It wasn't absolutely necessary, but if a place didn't have it, it kind of automatically moved it to the bottom of the list. I bought the house on my second trip here. The first trip, I came and just traveled all over the country to see which parts I liked and which parts I didn't like, which I would really recommend, because a lot of the stuff I've seen online, especially like cheap houses and stuff, is in Castelo Branco. I went there and I didn't really like it, and I know a really popular place is the Algarve. I also went there and didn't like it. It seems like a great place to visit, but not to live. So I think it's good to visit the different areas and see what you like and what you don't. And even Lisbon and Porto, there's a big difference in the vibe between the two of them, and usually people will like one or the other. And that was definitely one thing I learned from my time in Nicaragua, was being able to recognize the difference between a place that's good to visit and a place that's good to actually live. Like when I was at the Algarve, and I want to go back and give it another chance because I was just in the Lagos area. But it seemed like a great place for vacation, just absolute beautiful scenery. But the town itself felt like a British theme park version of Portugal. And then the other towns around it were pretty much just all vacation rentals and resorts. So it's not really any kind of community. And the people that did live there seemed just very burnt out. It just didn't seem like a place I would want to live personally, even though that's where a lot of people choose to move to when they come to Portugal. On that first trip, I really liked the central area, kind of Coimbra to Tomar. So that's really where I kind of focused my searches. Just looked at probably hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of houses online. Just kind of narrowed it down to a list of a few to look at when I came for the second time. And this house was second on the list. The first one actually sold before I made it back. I came here and I was actually able to look at this house day after I arrived. And I just liked it so much immediately. I don't even think I looked at other houses. At least I can't remember looking at them. So in the first video, there was a lot of comments saying that like I overpaid and I got ripped off and all that. And I thought they were really funny, just people being salty, realizing that they'd overpaid for their place. Because I'd looked at so many houses, so I knew what the prices were. And could have negotiated the price down a little more, maybe, but I really liked the house and was happy with the price. And I'd rather have both parties walk away happy than one feeling like they got ripped off. But then there was comments about being off grid and stuff. So that kind of made more sense that I probably would have overpaid if this house was in some abandoned village an hour down a 4-wheel drive road to the nearest coffee shop, or one without a road at all. But I'm right outside one of the biggest cities in the country, in a great little town that's got a grocery store, bank, several restaurants, coffee shops, everything you need without having to go to the city itself. Every house has like beautiful gardens. I'm sure you hear in the background there's birds chirping all the time. And it's just a great little town. It seems like once a month there's some big community event that the whole town comes out for. I'm about a 5-minute bike ride to the train station. There's 56 trains a day that stop here, 28 in one direction, 28 in the other. So it's very easy to get to Coimbra and back. It's also close enough that I can just bike it to the city when I want to. There's a bike path that goes there that's just kind of old country roads that with very little traffic. The bike path actually goes all the way from Coimbra to the beach. A lot of people do it on weekends, and it's real convenient because you can take bikes on the train for free, so you can bike there and then just take the train back if you're too tired. I pay 26 euros a month for a train pass, which is a little under $30, so less than €1 or $1 per day for unlimited rides from here to the city. And in town, there's dedicated bike paths, so you don't even have to be on the streets. There's also an extensive bus system, but it is pretty terrible, like worse than in the US. But they're building a metro. I don't know when it'll be done. It seems like they keep digging up and filling in the same areas over and over. But once they get that, it'll be really good. For the buses in town, I just have a card that I reload trips on. If you do 10 or more, it's like 62 cents a trip. And I pretty much just use it like when it's raining or if I'm going really far. But like I said, it's a terrible system and it's usually faster to just walk there even if it's an hour away. But luckily the weather's usually nice, and so I just take my bike into town and use that if I'm going far. But it's also a very walkable city. It is hilly, not as bad as Lisbon, but it's still pretty hilly. So about the area itself, I'm just outside of Coimbra, which is the 4th largest metro area in the country after Lisbon, Porto, and Braga. Coimbra was founded by the Romans. I couldn't find like an exact time, but the earliest I could find was like 2,000 years ago, so it's at least 2,000 years old. It's most famous for being the home of the University of Coimbra. It's one of the oldest universities in the world. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The comparison is usually that it's the Harvard or Oxford of the Portuguese-speaking world. It has around 25,000 students. It's at the top of the hill. It's very beautiful buildings, very, very old buildings, and it's the main tourist attraction here. Coimbra is pretty much halfway between Lisbon and Porto, right on the highway, right on the rail line. So it's really convenient to get to either of them. And both have major international airports. And it's really nice having the choice of the two because sometimes tickets at one will be half the price of tickets at the other. I really like it as a city. For me, it's like the perfect size city. It's not too small, not too big, and still well connected to everything. Like I said, easy access to the other parts of the country. There's a train that goes straight to the beach that's really close by. They're also building a high-speed train line. They'll go from Coimbra and connect straight into Spain's high-speed network. And Coldplay was even here recently and played 4 concerts over 5 nights at the stadium. For some reason, they chose Coimbra instead of 2 nights in Porto and 2 nights in Lisbon, and they even had tickets for 20 euros. So even they must really like the place too. I'll also do a more extensive video about the whole area in general. Like I said before, I work offshore, so I'm kind of keeping some videos on backlog to have something to put out while I'm out in the middle of the ocean for 4 to 6 weeks. So now just a really quick about me. I plan to do a whole video on it in the future because there will be a lot of really cool videos and pictures and stuff. And it's also kind of just a project that I want to do for myself. But in quick summary, like I've said before, I was born and raised in Arkansas. I went to college in Tucson and got a degree in biology with a chemistry minor. I'm also 6G X-ray certified pipe welder, D11 structural welder. Summers in college, I worked manual labor for housing construction. After college, I went up to Alaska and started working as a fisheries observer on board commercial fishing boats, essentially just taking biological samples and data from the catches of mostly pollock, trawl, and crab boats. And during that time, I ended up buying a place just outside of Grenada, Nicaragua, and then eventually later another one in Popoyo. And I kind of split the year between Alaska and Nicaragua. However, I kind of ended up always being in Alaska in the winter and Nicaragua in the hottest part of the year. I eventually settled in Seward, Alaska. If you've taken an Alaska cruise, you probably stopped there. It's an absolutely beautiful little town, but it's very small and very far from everywhere else. I also welded at a fish processing plant and a shipyard and fished for salmon for Fish and Game, just pulling in miles and miles of net by hand every summer, in addition to other random jobs that came up that sounded fun. And currently I work as a marine mammal observer. Protected species observer is the official name. But if you don't know what that is, I didn't before I got the job. I pretty much just watch out for whales and dolphins and other marine wildlife around construction or mapping projects at sea. There's more to it than that, but that's the gist of it. I did it in Alaska like 10 years ago when they were doing the exploratory drilling up there, but that work dried up. But I recently restarted doing it in the lower 48, and hopefully I'll be able to transition over to doing it in Europe. And one thing that I was going to put in the last video, but it was already so long, so I'll just add it here. In the kitchen video, there was a lot of comments about woodworm and people saying that I have to tear out all the wood and burn it, which is completely not true. Don't do that. There's plenty of treatments that exist. Unfortunately, here in Portugal, it seems like most of them probably aren't the best, which maybe is why people think you have to do that. From what I understand, woodworms are just a fact of life in old Portuguese houses. Even like you look at antique furniture in a store and you can see little woodworm holes. But there are treatments that exist to get rid of them. Most of the treatments I've seen here are cypermethrin in a solvent, which might be fine, but not really ideal, I feel like. I used water-based concentrate cypermethrin in Nicaragua to try to fight against the termites. It kind of worked. The problem is cypermethrin breaks down relatively fast in exposure to air and UV, and it's pretty toxic to people in addition to the bugs, with the addition of the toxicity of the solvents as well. So I'd much rather use a permethrin in water-based treatment. It lasts a lot longer. It's much safer for people. Like hair lice treatment, clothing treatments are permethrin. But it is worse for the environment since it doesn't break down as easy. So don't use it outside, please. Even here, there's a lot of garden insecticides that are permethrin, and it's don't do it. There are a few permethrin and solvent-based treatments here, but their concentration is 0.2% or less, and it's better to have it 0.25 or more. I've only been able to find one store that sells that. It's up near Braga, 3 hours away. Plus, I would probably need at least 50 liters to treat the whole house. So I'd much rather be able to use a concentrate like this. I can only find it on UK Amazon. If anybody knows something like it or something similar that's available in the EU, that'd be greatly appreciated. And of course, I'd much rather use something more natural, but since I'm treating it as an active infestation, I'll have to use something toxic. However, for new wood, there are several natural and safe products, like there's several different borate solutions. I know in the US it just comes in like a little bag that you mix with water. It doesn't penetrate deep into the wood, it's kind of more just a surface, but it's permanent. And there's another one that's interesting that is available here, and I think in the US also, that penetrates deep into the wood and essentially partially fossilizes it by impregnating it with silicone, so it's permanent. But if anybody does know where to find a concentrate like that, it'd be very helpful, because that's the main reason I've put off doing anything with the doors or windows or floor, because I don't want to sand everything and then have to wait until I can find the right treatment for it. So that's that. Now I'm off to Lisbon, and fingers crossed that I get to stay in Portugal, and I'll let y'all know in the next episode. Thanks again for watching. Ciao. I just wanted to give a quick update that I did get the residency permit, so now I'm an official Portugal resident, and I'm good for the next 2 years.
Vai provar.